Support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
It is hard to identify exactly when the buzz about North Carolina in economic development, education, forward-thinking policy went from darling to disparaged. It hasn't been just in the last 2 or 4 years, but seems to have been kind of a slow train coming. Welcome again to the most widely watched source of Carolina business and public policy. I'm Chris William, and this time, why does the Tar Heel state seem to be in a defensive mode with these things, or are they, that have made the North Carolina brand uniquely a leader in the New South? Is the brand tarnished, or is it transitioning? Later on, special guest John Lassiter from the Economic Partnership joins us. In a moment, though, we start the dialogue about the most current issues of the day with College of Charleston's Dr. Frank Hefner and Triad Business Journal publisher Doug Copeland. Stay with us.
Major funding also by Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. This edition of Carolina Business Review was recorded March 21st, 2014. On this week's program, Doug Copeland of the Business Journal of the Greater Triad, Dr. Frank Hefner of the College of Charleston, and special guest John Lassiter of North Carolina Economic Development Partnership, Inc. And now, here's Chris William.
Hello, welcome to our program. Happy spring. Wow.
Finally.
Yeah.
At some point, we're going to get the weather forecast right. How's that?
Is that like economic
I
forecasting?
think so. That you got it right there. Right on the nail.
You said that, Doug.
Yeah,
I had to ask you that. I'm sorry, Frank. You
right.
said that. Doug, let's start with you.
Okay.
Coal ash and Duke Energy. Seems like Duke Energy cannot get a break with regulators. First, it was the merger, post-merger issues, and now a coal ash, misfortunate coal ash issue. So what happens with Duke? Do they end up, do customers end up paying to clean up all of the coal ash ponds? Do they get a break with regulators? How is this thing going to unfold long term?
Well, I think that there are a couple things going to happen. One, Duke is going to have to pick up some portion of the tab, and how they allocate that is up for debate. I'm sure there'll be some public pressure on them not to charge 100% of the customers.
Yeah.
In addition, it is a huge problem, so they've got to get their arms around how big the problem is and find a long-term solution to it. And I think by the time this program airs, candidly, I think there'll be an announcement about the feds and the state coming in to help oversee some of that and maybe help with it in a remediation way.
Not so much of an industry or a company specific, but in South Carolina, we've got relatively shrinking unemployment numbers, Frank. I mean, you know this, but we still have this issue that CEOs and CFOs and those that hire still kind of scratch their heads in the chorus about, well, we can't find good workers. What is that all about?
Well, there are two things about this. First of all, the unemployment rate, and we don't want to get into the searchers versus the people who dropped out and stuff like that. And our unemployment rate recently did drop to below the national average once again. And people like to make political hay about that. But the real relevant feature to me is that number of actual jobs, we're not talking about the survey of people who's trying to look, grew at about 2.5% over the past year, which is a little bit higher than we'd all expected. So we're getting back to the kind of growth rates we need to see in order to have the economy fully rebound. The Charleston metro area, by the way, rebounded about 2 years ago. We got above from the time of the initial recession. The problem of matching the jobs with the skills, this is not going to go away. It's not unique to this recession. I think what the recession did is it highlights it. And one of the things that's highlighted is the fact that a lot of the jobs that have been created are typically the lower skill level jobs. And the higher skill level jobs that are needed, we don't have the personnel for. And that's where companies are saying, we'd love to hire, but we don't have and can't find.
So, Doug, to bring it back to you, the Triad in North Carolina specifically, what are you hearing from CEOs? What are you hearing from CFOs, specific about the economy and maybe about the one or two to-do issues that they have to face?
Well, it's the same as in South Carolina. We're seeing some guarded and cautious optimism. Still, things are unsettled nationally, so they're scared to take big, bold steps. And in terms of the jobs that are available, they require the same highly skilled workers you mentioned earlier and that Frank talked about. No matter how fast we train them out of our colleges and community college systems, it's not fast enough for industry, and they're constantly changing.
So in the Triad, Greensboro, Winston-Salem, High Point, and the area of dominant influence, if you will, the ADI, what do you think holds back the Triad from getting more traction in economic development? Is it just jobs? And also there's been some turnover in leadership around economic, more than average. What is it about that part of the state and the region?
I think a little bit of it is the fact that there are 3 or 4 or 5 significant cities, and to get them to work together as a region is very hard. We constantly hear positives about the Charlotte area, about how well Charlotte works together. And I don't mean the city of Charlotte, I mean the greater Metrolina region. And we are actually told often about requests for proposal, et cetera, that come out of the Metrolina area that show unanimity and working together, all pulling in the same direction. And we simply can't achieve that.
Frank, it's primary season in South Carolina, heading into it. Governor Haley has come out in support of a more defining education plan, what her ideas are. What else are we going to hear?
Well, as you know, I try to avoid the political issues, except the ones that are
on the air?
On the air,
Just
yes,
on the air?
except for the ones that are real close to home, which we're going to get to pretty soon. But I think the two burning issues that are going to be addressed and definitely need to be addressed is, and I'll take the second one first, and that is our road infrastructure. That has to be dealt with. We've got terrible roads. Everyone's documented it. Everyone knows it. And we just don't have the funding in order to do the rebuilding that needs to be done. And apparently the political will to come up with a mechanism. So that's one thing that's going to have to be addressed. The issue of jobs and skill levels for the people going into the job market, we are constantly, and we were having this discussion earlier before the show, it seems like we're constantly trying to reform and reinvent education. Which century we're going to get this right in? Some of the basics that we've known for a long time, but the big push right now that in her budget proposal was to enhance K through 12. And obviously that needs to be done, because if they're not ready to go to college, it doesn't matter how many doors you open to college for them. So that becomes very important to do, yes.
Tar Heel State legislative priorities, what do you think the hot one is?
It's going to be a short session, but I'll tell you one thing that will come up from business, and that is teacher pay. That has not been on business's agenda too much in the past, but it absolutely, our local chambers are making it part of their legislative agenda. You'll see the North Carolina chamber make teacher pay a part of their legislative agenda.
Was that because the governor came out and finally put a stake in the ground about, we need to do something about it, here's my proposal, or has this been kind of bubbling right below the surface?
I think the latter. We can't attract teachers right now, either within the education programs to train teachers or teachers to actually teach. In teacher pay, we've gone, and it's a moving target, so I'm scared to quote statistics, but at one point we were 20th in teacher pay in the nation. Today we're 48th. Now some of that's because other cities or other states are raising it faster than we might, but it has been flat for a number of years, and business is terribly, terribly concerned about the ability to attract teachers and losing teachers.
So we're going to hear more about teacher pay, or we're going to hear more about ed reform on a basic DNA level?
Well, both are happening, but I think business is going to be concerned about teacher pay. People aren't going into the profession. It's everything we talked about at the beginning of this program. You need these skilled workers, and you can't get them unless you've got a plethora of teachers at every level of the education system.
We have about a minute left, and I'll do the disclaimer for you,
Okay,
Dr.
thank
Hefner. You are at the College of Charleston,
Yes.
but I do want to ask you this question. Low Country has been a buzz for a while about what seems to be a forced merger between MUSC and the College of Charleston, and I say it that that way, because the State House first came out with not the idea, but starting to make, at least pass the House, now it's in the Senate. If this happens, and you can argue both sides, what happens? Does it become a larger university? Is it better for economic development? How do you come down on this?
Well, okay, so, and we don't have the 30 minutes it takes to argue both sides. But very, very skilled and thoughtful people, for example, Mayor Riley has come out in favor of the merger, so has the Chamber of Commerce. The faculty and administration, well, the faculty of both institutions have come out against the merger, basically. I think the issue we need to look at is, it is true that for every Austin, Texas, there's a University of Texas, there's a comprehensive research university. But no one hears about Manhattan, Kansas, which has Kansas State in it. So you can have a comprehensive research university located in an area, and it doesn't imply necessarily economic growth. So I think it should evolve rather than be mandated. And a lot of the things that the Chamber has come out for, and people, and the businesses are saying they need, neither institution currently delivers. That is computer science, computer engineering, in technology, and those kind of fields. We don't provide, and neither does MUSC, so I'm not too sure how a merger would actually accomplish that purpose.
Is there, besides a frontal assault legislatively on forcing that, is there another alternative that could be thought that might satisfy both sides of the argument?
That has been brought up. A lot of the reasons we can't deliver some of the things that are being asked for is the legislature's mandated that the institutions cannot do it. And so that legislation could possibly be changed.
Yeah, okay.
So that'd be another option.
More to come on that, and you're right. 60 seconds on a program is not nearly enough. Just, raises questions more than it does anything else. Next week on this program, speaking of universities, Dr. Harris Pastides will be on this program again. He, of course, leads the iconic South Carolina institution, the University of South Carolina. He joins us. And then in 2 weeks, Garrett Makita, the CEO of upstate South Carolina bus manufacturer Proterra, will also be on this program. You know, our guest is no stranger to crucial policy issues as well as political and business leadership in North Carolina. As a business owner, as an attorney, as a former Charlotte City Councilman, as a Board of Education member, as a close advisor to North Carolina Governor McCrory, and now chairman of the newly formed North Carolina Economic Development Partnership, he directly influences the arc of the Tar Heel State, probably for many years to come. We welcome back to the discussion John Lassiter. Mr. Chairman, good to have you here.
Great to be here, Chris. Thank you very much.
Oh, absolutely. John, this North Carolina Economic Development Partnership, this is a pretty big tact, a different take for what has been an iconically public institution, and that is, I'm talking about Department of Commerce in North Carolina. This is a private nonprofit. What goes into the thought of this? How did you get to this point, and how does your group see going forward?
Well, you really kind of roll back to the transition process for the governor. I actually chaired that as well, and we had a group of business leaders who analyzed how departments of commerce work across the country and came to the conclusion that the public-private partnership model was best for North Carolina. When our Economic Development Board began meeting in July, we began the process to integrate that into our process, and in fact, back in the late fall, hired the CEO operating under budget powers that came out of the legislature, and just this past week, had our 501c3 approved by the IRS, so we can now fully operate. But the model is public and private. So it will take functions that exist within Department of Commerce, sales, marketing, international trade, travel, tourism. They'll be given the opportunity to work in a much more nimble and flexible place while it still has to operate within kind of the public purview. So we'll have to comply with the transparency issues that you want for any time that public money is involved. We will really get fully going early in the summer when we'll go back and hopefully get Senate Bill 127 fully authorized by the House and Senate and begin to kind of move a number of folks who are currently within Commerce over to this new vehicle and kind of flesh out the rest of what we need to really be competitive with our competition, like South Carolina, like Louisiana, like Indiana, where they already have that kind of a vehicle that gives them an enormous amount of flexibility and speed, doesn't get bogged down in the way you have to operate if you're fully within the public sector.
Does Senate Bill 127 seems like it would be crucial to get that done?
Well, we operated without it, and it would have passed, but it got caught up in a revenue question about whether you could take revenue from fracking and drive that into funding long-term the partnership. We will have to identify some methodology to look for ongoing revenue stream, and that's part of what Dick Lindenmuth, who is our CEO, is doing. But a lot of it will be just a function of companies across North Carolina who recognize that the broader platform and the ability to see their dollars go to work can be very, very effective and quick to attract the kinds of businesses that we know we need to grow our economy and put people back to work.
Doug?
In my area, one of the big things that we're focused on is development of 1 or 2 mega sites. The land has been identified, pretty good transportation infrastructure. The big question we have, does the state have the will to fund land development and incentives late after that, which can be $80–90 million?
Well, I think that's the affirmative to that, and the project I worked through from the roughly July until December was developing a 10-year strategic plan for North Carolina, and incentives and tax structure, and as well as using state resources to prep sites, even to the point of potentially building some shells, primarily in rural areas in that case. But we know mega sites are critical, that when a company is beginning to identify a place to go, if you don't have the land ready, if you can't get the land all under your control and get the infrastructure to it, that project can go to South Carolina, like we saw with Continental and Boeing. And so we've got to be competitive. We've got to have those sites ready, and there's obviously a very large mega site in Guilford County. There's one that's just been kind of developed now outside of Wake County, Chatham County. And then we've got 2 or 3 that are down in, Brunswick, for example, was in the running for the Continental plant. So we know those are important, but it's not just mega site. It is trying to get pad-ready manufacturing and distribution sites ready to go wherever they happen to be. They might be in Henderson County, they might be in Watauga County, they might be in Brunswick, but they also might be in that Piedmont Crescent, where I think we're going to see more and more those 3 communities, those 3 broad urban communities working collectively together to pitch opportunities that fit somewhere within that, because of you already have an educated workforce, you got great transportation, and you've got the viability of cities and counties who can play their role in making things happen.
A lot of this to me speaks of attracting outside firms locating into North Carolina, and that's a standard policy we've also done in South Carolina. But how do you plan to address things like homegrown industries, for example, and maybe spawning more of an entrepreneurial climate in the state? Well,
one of the things we did in our strategic plan was spend some time looking at how entrepreneurs and innovative technology can be brought together, and it's a function of kind of taking care of your creative class, so that the students that we get out of our primary research institutions don't end up going to Boston or Austin or San Jose. They stay here and grow their business here. We've got to look at things like the way in which we tax founder stock and angel investment. There's a great program in California that basically lets that capital gain go free for a while. We've also want to change the methodology within our universities, and there's been an upside down analysis that says that the idea is the most important thing. And so universities possess the idea and capitalize at about 75% of the value. Actually, the execution is the application's the value. And if you ask an entrepreneur, they're going to have spent 2 or 3 pivots as they get their company together. We spent a bunch of time looking at incubators, and I went into one and I said, tell me, these bunch of serial entrepreneurs said, what do you need? And they said, I thought they said venture capital, which we know we're deficient in. They said, no, we need coders. I said, really? It says there's no coders coming out of NC State, no coders coming out of UNC Chapel Hill. So we've had to cut a deal to get the coders we need from Wake Tech. So breaking down those silos within our education institutions, feeding that entrepreneurial spirit can give us a terrific boost, really in places all over the state.
John, let me follow up with that, because at the end of last year, President Obama was in North Carolina, went to Randy Woodson's campus, Centennial campus maybe, up at NC State, and it would seem like that was a great opportunity to enhance what state already does. We've got federal support. Is there a lost it's not fair to say, but is there a lost opportunity with that kind of announcement, with that kind of horsepower? And I'm not talking about the president, I'm talking about the horsepower that NC State already has.
Well, I think it's just a review of how you try to drive activity out of your research institutions. If you're a college professor, my father's a college professor at NC State, by the way, and you're rewarded on research, you're rewarded on grants, you're not rewarded on job creation. And so I was at UNC Charlotte a couple weeks ago, and they just opened the portal, which is their new hub for entrepreneurship, talking with a professor there who was complaining to me that she says, I've started 3 businesses here, but my reviews are all a function of my research. Well, that's upside down. And so we've got to change the methodology within our tenure tracks, change the methodology within our pay scales, and begin to understand that there's a direct link between those millions of dollars that flow into our institutions and what they can do if they're routed into growing our economy, that then creates more money ultimately for the institutions to flourish. So we've kind of arbitrarily bound them up by standards that really don't apply in this new economy.
Doug?
You know, you don't make a change like this overnight.
Oh, no.
But I spend a lot of time with the business people, a lot of time in business groups, and they want to know when it's going to happen. So what's next? What's the next measurable thing that we'll all be able to sort of put our arms around and say, okay, this is what we've been waiting for?
Well, the next thing in terms of where I'm involved is we will bring our Economic Development Board back together in the middle of April. And we've had our staff developing matrices and measures for the 90+ recommendations in our plan. And so someone will have responsibility, which is an amazing thing in government to think, oh, somebody actually has to do this and get measured for it. So that will then provide a methodology to track that going forward. Then we'll probably turn the lights on in the partnership sometime around the 1st of July. And that will transition all these key roles. Travel and tourism will begin to have a new home, international growth and development have a new home, which lets us go in and look at our reach across the world and understand how we apply the resources we have. Some of them will stay the same place, so you won't see a lot of change in the regulatory side of commerce. But I think by the time we get to the end of the year, we'll have a very different place, and then our partners across the platform, our business partners, our education partners, our partners within government will have to begin to move against this new model and adjust the way they do business in order to be on the same page that we're in.
Frank,
so how are you going to bring everyone into this, I guess? I mean, what's your reach into the business community to get them to participate?
Well, we had several things that we did as we put these pieces together. One, when we appointed our Economic Development Board, it was made up of 25 business people. We had five CEOs of Fortune 500 companies who served, and they range from kind of traditional banking to innovative software and manufacturing applications. We then expanded those groups to have folks who came in with expertise within different industries and ideas, and then we sent the secretary and the governor's economic advisors out, and they had listening tours all across the state, and asked business leaders to come in and tell us what they needed. We've got I think, a terrific opportunity, and one of the recommendations is what's called, we're still filling the name, but it's called the Office of the Repealer in the state of Tennessee that Governor Haslam created. It said, here is a conduit that if at this clearinghouse, if something's holding your business back, you tell us about it. We're going to go find where the pinch point is and try to get that rule or regulation either off the books or modified in a way that doesn't slow your ability down to build your plant, get your line running, get cleared through building codes, all those things that if you're a business owner or a developer, you just wince every time we have to go through that process.
I wish we had more time, guys. Thank you. John, please come back. We'll have you back in the summer when you get some traction and turn the lights on, as you said. Good luck going forward. Just very quick, and it's not enough time to to give her credit. But we lost a valuable member of this team, and you won't know who she is. But I would look even pastier white, and even worse than I do now, if it not been for her. Her name was Jeannie Fry, and if you put that picture up, Jeannie was a sweet soul, a kind person, and was our makeup artist extraordinaire, and helped us over so many rough parts for me and for some of our guests. She will be greatly missed, and our deepest sympathies and our feelings to her family for your loss. Thank you for watching our program. Until next week, I'm Chris William, and we hope your business and certainly your spring weekends going forward now will be good. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton, operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care, when and where you need it. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.com.